The birds were running into everything. It almost seemed like they were committing suicide.
All of a sudden, we have 5,000 dead birds in our city, and everyone wants to know what happened.
900 dolphins recently washed ashore in Peru, along with 1,000 pelicans. And over in the UK, 40,000 dead crabs washed ashore.
I can't explain it. It's out of this world. And then it started happening all over the planet.
Animals are dying in huge numbers. And the human animal may be next.
Within the next decade, we're going to see a disease emerge out of one of these hotspots and start to spread globally. It's a matter of when, not if.
It's New Year's Eve, 2010.
I was actually sitting in my recliner watching Dick Clark. 20 minutes after that, I heard the first thump on the north end of the house near my daughter's room. It actually sounded like what an orange would sound like if it hit the side of your house. And I decided to go out front to see if someone was throwing something at the house or what was going on. It was around that time that I pointed the light up into the air, and it was unreal, the amount of birds that were above me. The sound sounded like water rushing over the top of me. The birds were running into everything. As I stood and watched them, I watched birds bounce off my own home, off the front windshield of my vehicle, my son's basketball goal, the mailbox, the trees, anything in sight. The birds were low enough that I had to duck left and right a couple of times to keep from getting hit. It almost seemed like they were committing suicide. It was unreal. They were flying straight into things.
And Mike Overstreet is not the only witness.
Police Department, Mary, can I help you?
There are numerous, very large number of birds that are dead all up and down the road.
I was wondering why all the birds are just like dying. We are trying to find that out. We have our officers are out there and they're trying to figure out what's going on.
I don't know if it's silly or not, but
You got birds everywhere?
yes.
BB police respond to the 911 calls.
I thought it was probably just a practical joke. You know, people call in stuff all the time. Once I turned into the Wynwood Division, I observed a lot of dead animals, a lot of dead birds.
And then, without warning, Officer Hightower is in the center of the storm.
First thing I heard was a pretty loud thud. When I looked up, it was a bird that had struck the hood of my unit. And it pretty much rained birds from that point. And that's when I actually become a little bit concerned for my own safety. I was worried to track something, maybe I would have gotten sick.
BB resident Charles Moore wakes to find something he'll never forget.
Well, I got up pretty early on New Year's Day, as I normally do. Normal routine is to go out and get the newspaper. I stopped about right here, and there were dead blackbirds all over this yard. probably 20 to 25. And I looked down the street, and it looked like a war zone out there. It looked like something, maybe heavy artillery had blown these birds out of the sky.
BB officials want the dead birds off the streets immediately. But when the cleanup begins, the mystery deepens.
When we got there that morning and started picking up the birds, we thought that it was really weird that all of the birds, 98% of the birds, were the red-winged blackbird.
All of a sudden, we have 5,000 dead birds in our city, and everyone wants to know what happened. What killed the birds?
Bert, you heard about the birds falling out of the sky? Well, this is the fish coming out of the river. There's thousands of drum all the way up and down the beach here.
Just 160 kilometers northwest of BB, another strange story is unfolding in Ozark, Arkansas.
Wow, dude. Aliens or what, guys?
David Morrow, a commercial fisherman, has worked on the Arkansas River for years.
A friend of mine, he told me this weird stuff that was going on. Me, my brother, and my cousin decided to go check it out.
You seen the birds? Look at the fish. They said there's 100,000 of them, at least.
We walked down the beach, and every step you took, there's probably 20 or 30 of them things laying around, everywhere. I grabbed the phone. I wanted to document this evidence for the world to see.
There's fish all up and down the beach. There's drum everywhere.
It was silver lined on each side of the bank.
Looked like, sort of like trash.
Yeah.
But it was fish.
It was piles of them.
There's some more. They're all over the place, man.
There are over 100 different species of fish in the Arkansas River. But only one lies dead on the banks.
Just drum. There's no other fish involved. It's all drum. And there's only one species of birds that fell out of the sky in BB, too. Because none of the animals are messing with these fish. You figure that you'll have some birds or something eating on these, but there's nothing touching them. They've been laying here since New Year's Day. Dude, this is nuts.
I've never seen it the whole time I've lived here in Arkansas. I don't think anybody else has seen it either, but it's first time for everything, I guess. It's scary. Scary as hell.
Man, I wouldn't touch them, man. We need to be wearing masks.
Not taking any chances, BB officials call in a hazardous materials team.
The mayor got to thinking that, you know, this could be something bigger than what we think it is.
So I was standing out in the front yard, looking down the street, watching the activity, and here come men carrying these 5-gallon orange buckets, and they had hazmat suits on. So we were all just kind of frozen, you know, for a while, afraid to do anything. You know, what really caused this? What's going on? Is there poison in the air? Is it safe to breathe the air in BB? Is it the water? What is it?
For 2 days, hazmat crews clean up the birds.
We didn't count, but we estimated between 3,000 to 5,000 birds. And still, there was no reason we could think of that would kill that many birds.
Birds littering a town. Dead fish lining 30 kilometers of river. People want to know, what's going on in Arkansas?
As a naturalist, one of the first things that I think of when I hear about these mass bird die-offs is poisoning. I know that the U.S. Department of Agriculture actually has a campaign of poisoning red-winged blackbirds to help farmers who are losing their crops to the birds. I know also that there's a lot of farmland around BB, Arkansas. So this is a real possibility.
Unfortunately, sometimes protecting agriculture and the environment requires the lethal control of some animals. USDA Wildlife Services uses a pesticide called DRC 1339, It is a pesticide specifically for birds. With 70 million red-winged blackbirds migrating through the Midwest, even a small portion of them lands on your crop, it can be devastating. There are rice farmers and sunflower farmers who have lost 100% of their crop to blackbirds. In the year of the BB incident, USDA removed a total of 600,000 red-winged blackbirds, about 800,000 brown-headed cowbirds, about 30,000 grackles, and 1.5 million invasive European starlings.
Some think the BB blackbird die-off was a part of the USDA species control. But for the New Year's Eve incident, there's one major hitch.
At the time of the BB Arkansas incident, USDA was not conducting any pesticide management in Arkansas or in that area at all.
The USDA says that they didn't poison these birds. The next step is to take some of these corpses and send them for a necropsy or an animal autopsy, and then hopefully we'll figure out what's really going on.
Several corpses are sent to the USGS Wildlife Health Center lab in Madison, Wisconsin.
First thing we do when we have a die-off of a large number of birds at a location is to take some x-rays of the dead birds. And this helps us to determine if any of them have been gunshot and to find evidence of physical trauma, broken bones, that sort of thing. This x-ray of the birds from BB Arkansas show that some birds had bones that had been snapped like twigs. And I'm going to have to open these birds and do a necropsy to verify that these broken bones occurred at the time of death and was the cause of death. I'm beginning my external exam. I'm pulling on the eyelids, examining the eyes for any evidence of bleeding or infection. And I'm looking for evidence of blood that might have been coughed up from internal injuries.
After examining several birds, Dr. Green finds a strange and gruesome pattern.
I found the vast majority of them had impact injuries that was the probable cause of death in all instances. Many of these birds appeared to have had injuries like they had been hit by a baseball bat.
The BB blackbirds died from blunt force trauma.
So the next question is, what hit these birds so hard?
Thousands of dead birds litter the ground in BB Arkansas, their bodies battered and beaten. Witnesses to this bizarre event still have many questions.
The authorities tried to tell us that everything's okay as they gathered up the birds in hazmat suits, you know.
Meanwhile, up on the Arkansas River, things just keep getting weirder. The banks are covered with dead fish, and there's still no forthcoming explanation.
And they were all, 15, 20 feet away from the water, just kind of in a straight line, like they just washed up on the shoreline. Just dead.
With all these deaths occurring in such a short time and in such a small area, speculation starts flying.
Wow, dude. This is the end of times, is what we figured on.
I was amazed, astounded. I didn't have no words. It scared me to death because it was something like from out of this world. Biblical, apocalyptic type stuff.
Everybody has their own theory. Some think it was aliens. Lots and lots of theories.
The USGS Wildlife Health Center lab in Madison, Wisconsin. Investigators here specialize in mysterious animal die-offs.
The mission of the National Wildlife Health Center is to safeguard wildlife and ecosystem health. When there's a mass death of wildlife, it's our job to go out and investigate. We investigate approximately 600 to 700 in a single year.
And investigators have recently witnessed a disturbing trend.
There definitely appears to be an uptick in the reports of mass wildlife die-offs, both in the United States as well as across the globe.
Norway. Masses of dead herring wash ashore. United Kingdom. 40,000 devil crabs perish. Brazil. 100 tons of sardines float to the surface. The Philippines. Tons of milkfish dead. Peru. 900 dolphins mysteriously die. And in Italy, thousands of turtle doves drop dead from the sky.
You started seeing it on every channel all over the world. People started freaking out all over the world. It started happening everywhere. Different species of animals started dying off.
Other people think the mass deaths are a sign and a warning of worse to come.
What's happening on planet Earth is definitely not business as usual.
Pastor Steve Wohlberg is a Christian minister. He believes the die-offs are part of biblical prophecy.
All right, good morning, everybody. Good to be here. When I learned about the 5,000 birds that fell over Arkansas and then the 100,000 dead fish at the same time that washed ashore on the Arkansas River, I thought to myself that God is speaking to us through these events. Something big, something apocalyptic is happening. These kind of things are straight from the Bible. Hosea chapter 4, verse 3 says, the birds and the fish will be taken away. And when you look at the big picture, these kind of things fit perfectly into the signs of the approaching end of the world.
Wohlberg believes that humans are to blame.
The Bible talks about the immorality that would be rampant in the time right before the day of the Lord. And that immorality is manifesting itself in the corruption of the earth, the destruction of the planet in many different ways, which is affecting the animals and the fish and the birds. And we're reaping the consequences. You see on the screen the title of my talk today, Mass Animal Deaths. Is this a sign of the end? Let's take a look at this. Jesus said that there would be famines and pestilences, which is another word for diseases. And then he said there would be fearful sights. Did you see that? Fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. People are going to see strange things in the last days.
Our job is to provide the scientific information to explain why these events occur. Whilst certainly we understand people's concern and may read into these events certain signs, we focus on the science and providing scientific explanations.
People like Wahlberg see connections between their beliefs and these mysterious events.
Jesus said that there would be great earthquakes in diverse places. Terrible earthquakes would rattle the earth.
In the months leading up to the Burden fish die-offs, Arkansas suffered a series of earthquakes. Though not severe, the number has risen from 50 a year to 50 a month. But experts at the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission don't see a link between the earthquakes and the die-offs, and continue to search for answers.
The public and the press and everybody had a lot of speculation about what might have killed them, why it was all one species primarily. Our estimate turned out to be about 80,000 fish, which I've never seen anything on that level before in 35 years of working with the agency. So we knew it was a serious fish kill.
It's been dead a while. Its gills have lost most of their coloration. There was a lot of concern. Was there any health concerns for the public? We knew we needed to find answers quick.
We're going to go down about 18 inches, which is what we consider a surface sample.
First thing we wanted to check was toxic chemicals in the water.
We're looking for high levels of anything that could poison the fish.
Investigators discover the water in the Arkansas River does not have any abnormal toxins. The team must look deeper for answers.
And we cut the fish open with an incision here. We're going to cut around this way and up here through the back. And then we can pull the fish open and take a look at the inside and check and see how the organs look and see if there's any large parasites or discolored organs or any problems like that.
As Dr. Goodwin examines the freshwater drum, he discovers an important clue.
This is the swim bladder here, and right now it's overfilled, and you can see how it's stretched and the top cover is tearing. And it's just like a balloon. If we cut it open or just put a little hole in it, it deflates. Inside, it's just an empty sack full of gas. When I dissected the drum from the New Year's die-off, we saw overinflated swim bladders. And that got us thinking about gas bubble disease.
Fish can get gas bubble disease due to the nature of the very water they're swimming in.
They're living in water that has too much gas in it, and they absorb it through their gills into their blood, and then it comes fizzing out of their blood like the bubbles when you open a can of Coke. So we went ahead and looked at gills tissues under our microscope, and you can see the bubbles here in this tissue that are blocking the blood vessels in the fish, so the blood can't get to critical organs. And this is the kind of thing that certainly can cause fish kills. In my 15 years of being here, we've never seen gas bubble disease like this in wild fish, so this is very unusual.
Now, researchers must find why gas levels turned lethal.
So you can see a little better.
We're going to go ahead and check the gas saturation of the water. Around 120%, anything above that will kill fish.
Gas saturation rises when water and air mix under pressure.
On the river, usually dams are around the only place that does happen.
Records from the time of the die-off reveal why the gas levels became deadly.
The reason that day was different was there was a lot of water releasing going on. They had 10 gates open for 10 hours. And so there was a vast amount of water that was coming through at that point in time.
The huge school of fish was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time.
These fish were right next to the dam, and they were congregated there, so they were hit with it immediately.
Officials say they know what killed the fish, but they're still no closer to explaining what happened to the BB blackbirds.
On New Year's Eve, I had come outside just to take it easy that afternoon, drink a glass of tea and relax after work. I stepped out on the front porch, and that's when I noticed the birds coming over, which they do every year at this time. And that particular afternoon, it seemed to be, a little more than usual. There were just thousands upon thousands of them moving across the sky. It was beautiful, the way they were moving in unison, as far as you could see.
The birds settle in for the night, but hours later start mysteriously flying into things.
The key question is, why were these birds flying at night? A lot of birds can see well in the dark, but not red-winged blackbirds. And so when it's dark out, they're just roosting in the trees. So if they were flying at night, something must have really scared them.
One important clue to the BB mystery is the day and time of the die-off. New Year's Eve.
If it was loud enough to cause me to flinch in my chair, if it was loud enough to cause a human being to flinch sitting inside a house, I would imagine it would be more than loud enough to send several 100,000 birds into the air. It was about 20 minutes after that I heard a first thump on the north end of the house.
If someone set off fireworks near their roost, it essentially would have been like yelling fire in a crowded theater. The birds would have panicked, they all would have taken off, and since they can't see at night like other birds can, they really wouldn't know where they were going. They wouldn't be able to land, they wouldn't even see each other. So probably what would have happened is that they would have smashed into buildings and power lines and even each other, which probably resulted in the death of many of them.
But still, opinions in Arkansas are divided. While some believe the official explanation, not everyone's convinced.
We have fireworks every year. So why this year? I don't know. I can't explain that. I think there'll always be some doubt in my mind. I really do.
All the way up and down the beach here. Dude, this is nuts. Even the baby drum gets this. They said there's 100,000.
And others believe there's something more to this story.
It's for the public to decide for their own self. If they're smart enough to see through the black and white on things, they need to check it out. If they're not, they can be like the rest of the sheep and just go ahead and baja with everybody else, you know what I mean?
Die-offs in Arkansas or Italy or Norway or really anywhere are often hard to explain. But what's even more ominous is the unexplained disappearance of entire species. And that's actually happening all around the globe.
You have a colony that has 30,000 bees in it. You come back 2 weeks later, and the population has crashed. It's just disappeared. Something's wrong. No dead bees, no nothing.
All over the planet, fish, birds, and other animals are dying en masse. But bees are disappearing at a furious rate.
Nobody's home, no bees, nothing here.
In 2006, bees start vanishing.
We actually don't know where they're going. We don't find the corpses. They're probably flying off and dying. That's the most likely scenario. But the reality is we don't know.
This strange phenomenon is called colony collapse disorder.
What's puzzling about colony collapse disorder is that you still may have 2,000 bees left in the colony, but the other 25,000 or so have disappeared, and it happens in a very short time window. We've been losing about 1/3 of the bees every year, which is kind of unsustainable.
Disappearing bees raise the stakes for investigators and everyone else on Earth. Because losing bees poses a direct threat to the world's food supply.
Most people think about bees and why bees are important. They might think of honey and beeswax. That's fine, but it's really the pollination that they do. Bees put about 1/3 of our food on our table, but it's really the nutritious things that they put on our table, fruits, nuts, and vegetables. If bees were to totally disappear, I think we'd just barely survive. You'd have food shortages. We're not there yet. But even with bees threatened as they are, they're really threatened right now, we're having trouble meeting the pollination demand in the U.S. We're almost at this pollination crisis, probably one bad season away from that.
That's not the end of the bad news.
These bats come out over this valley and then follow it to where they need to go.
Another very important species is disappearing. Fast.
What we have here right now is a situation where we've lost 5 to 7 million bats across the eastern United States. So you're literally looking at the loss, the demise of an entire suite of species in what is really a blink of time.
Scott Darling has studied bats for years.
There's some work that has suggested bats may eat as many as 600 insects per hour, particularly mosquitoes or small flying insects. Those bats that have died in our state would have eaten about 2.5 billion insects per night.
In the winter of 2008, these bats started doing something they'd never done before. They started flying out of the cave during the day. And instead of hibernating when there is no food, they are active and flying in the winter.
People began to observe bats in the months of January. Here we were with snow on the ground, temperatures below freezing, and people reporting, why am I seeing bats flying around? It became very clear that something was unnatural, something was very, very wrong. People would come home from work and they'd look up on the roof of their house or on the windows of their house and they'd see bats just hanging there. And in most cases, those bats were already dead.
At least bat researchers have corpses to study.
When we go to investigate these die-offs and we find colonies that the bees have disappeared in, we do look in the surrounding area. We look in the grass and we're just not finding the corpses. So where they're going is still a mystery.
Any dead bees would help in decoding this enigma.
We take them back to the lab and we take them and we grind them up and ask questions about, do you have this virus? Do you have this gut pathogen? Things like that.
But so far, Dr. Pettis has not found the reason tens of billions of bees abandon their hives.
We know a lot of different things that can kill a honeybee colony. Parasitic mites, viruses, gut parasites, things like that. And when we started looking at colonies with colony collapse disorder symptoms, we tried to fit those same things into that model, and it just didn't match. Nothing matched up. If anyone tells you that they totally understand what's happening with colony collapse disorder, they're probably not correct.
vanishing bees could spell disaster. But so far, the mystery remains unsolved.
Father, we come to you today to try to understand another one of the signs of the times that point us to the big day, to the apocalypse.
I think in most cases there are scientific explanations that we can eventually put our finger on, and whatever those causes may be, it doesn't negate biblical prophecy.
It definitely was a fearful sight for the residents of Beebe, Arkansas, who woke up to find dead birds all over the city. How many of you have heard about
Something big, something apocalyptic is happening, and when you compare this with all the other creature die-offs around the world, it's just another sign among many that we are in the days prior to the end of the world.
Even wildlife experts are getting worried. The scale of these die-offs is staggering. As researchers return to assess the bats, they can't believe what they're seeing.
Milu male dead.
Female dead.
Milu female dead.
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 Those are the kind of sights that really struck us very hard as we went around from cave to cave trying to see if our bats were dying.
So this is the beginning of case number 23933. Accession number 1, little brown bat, weight 5.93 grams. The ears are unremarkable. The skin is smooth and shiny. The eyes are bright and unremarkable.
Dr. Carol Metier realizes it's essential to solve the riddle of the disappearing bats.
There is loss of elasticity in the central area of the primary section of wing. Usually, the more animals that die in an event, the easier it is to diagnose. But these bats look normal. It really was alarming. What was killing them? I looked at the organs inside, and those looked normal as well. So something different than we had ever dealt with before was happening. And with nothing really obvious to the naked eye.
But under the microscope, Metier discovers something new and horrifying.
What I was seeing was nothing that I'd ever seen before. You look at it and your palms start to sweat because you have a fungus, actually a skin fungus, eroding through living tissue. That doesn't happen.
Metier uses ultraviolet light to see exactly where the fungus is attacking.
And we determined that each of these spots of fluorescence is actually an area where the fungus is eroding through the skin membrane. The disease started with the name white nose syndrome because of the white, fluffy material seen on the muzzle of the bat.
Researchers believe the fungus makes bats desperately thirsty during hibernation.
So that they have to wake more often to try to even just find some sort of fluid to sustain them. And then they're battling two things, starvation and dehydration.
In only 4 years, this cave has become a bat graveyard.
Oh, geez, look at here. Holy cow. Wow. So you see these bats were hibernating right up there and then they drop. Yeah. Look at that. Oh my gosh. That's all bone?
Yeah.
All bones. It looks like pine needles.
Yeah, look at this. Just right here, there's 8 skulls. Just right here.
Last time I was here, we were doing some surveying and I was doing some photography work, and When I got home, there were still bones in the tread of my boots, and I just sat on the floor in my basement and cried for a while. It's a lot to think about that just a few years ago there were hundreds of thousands of bats here.
Metier does not know why this once benign fungus has turned deadly.
Somehow, this type of fungus has jumped to eating living tissue rather than just decomposing dead tissue. It has decided it likes living tissue. This is something new. It was so new that we had a hard time convincing everyone else that this fungus was actually what was causing white nose syndrome and the mortality that was happening out there.
It is alarming when a new disease attacks whole animal species. But perhaps more frightening is that animal diseases are jumping to humans and killing people by the millions.
If you look at the diseases that have got into the human population in the past few decades, the majority come from wildlife. It's a simple fact.
When diseases start jumping species, the stakes are raised. The loss of birds, fish, and insects are alarming, but scientists point out that our own species is also under threat as new diseases emerge.
"20, 30 years ago, we certainly knew about wildlife diseases, and they could cause some fairly large die-offs. But they very rarely jumped or appeared to jump to humans, whereas today, the consequences of these diseases seem to be far more severe.
Every year we get, 5 or 6 new diseases emerge into the human population. Each one of those has the potential to spread and become a global pandemic. Most scientists who work on this agree that pandemics are going to happen. It's not a case of if or are they going to happen, it's a case of when are they going to happen. HIV/AIDS, probably the most significant pandemic to hit the human population, came from a chimpanzee. So a chimpanzee virus killed 40 million people on the planet. That's an amazing thing. If we go back in history and we look into the Middle Ages, there's Black Death, and this is a bacterium that emerged from animals, got into people, moved along the trade routes, and killed basically a third of Europe. We've got the 1918 influenza virus that killed over 20 million. If you look at some of the more recent diseases, we've got swine flu, H1N1 influenza virus, that had genes from birds, from pigs. So we've got this mixture of genes going into an influenza virus that make it suddenly able to jump out into humans and become a pandemic.
This jumping of infectious agents or viruses can occur on a surprisingly frequent basis, partly because an increasing in contact between humans and wildlife allows these jumps to take place.
If we make contact with them, if we hunt them, if we eat them, if we build a road into the forest where they live, we have a risk of catching those viruses, and that's what's really going on a planetary scale. What worries me the most is that in our society we sit here and think we're safe. We don't realize that we're doing these things around the planet that make us incredibly vulnerable to these we can show really clearly that the number of pathogens getting into the human population increases every year. It has increased for the past few decades. And because we're continuing to make these big changes to the planet, it will continue to rise.
There has been an increase in these creature deaths all over the planet in the last couple years. This is not normal. It's an apocalyptic sign that humanity is destroying the planet. We're ruining the environment that God made, and that is affecting the animals, it's affecting His creation, and it's also affecting people.
Pastor Wahlberg believes that the mass animal die-offs are a sign of things to come.
As Revelation 11, verse 18 says, humanity will be destroying the earth. And that's what we're seeing around us. And we're seeing the consequences in the environment and in these mass creature deaths. And we're also seeing it in human beings starting to reap what they have sown.
Even if these pathogens originate in remote jungles, they can decimate first world countries.
It will always gravitate to the country that travels the most, and that's the US, it's Europe, it's the richer countries of the world. So we're at risk. If you think about an emerging disease that came to the US a few years ago, West Nile virus, we knew about it, but it was in Europe and Africa. Suddenly it emerged in New York, of all places, right next to the airport at JFK and LaGuardia. So why did that happen? It happened because every year we travel more and more from one country to the other. It's going to be pretty much impossible to get rid of. And every year it causes death, it causes disability. What really keeps me awake at night is when I look outside into the countryside and I see animals, I see the viruses they carry, and I think, what is the next one that's going to emerge?